Meantime, Switzerland is freezing the assets of Muammar Qaddafi and his entourage for 3 years. The Swiss say they want to avoid misappropriation of the funds. Of course, no one's saying how much money there actually is. The research group Global Financial Security has come up with a list of top countries for illicit financial outflows over an 8-year period. In the #1 spot, the developing world, China. Then Russia, Mexico, Saudi Arabia, and Malaysia. Joining us now is the Director of Global Financial Security, Raymond Baker. He joins us live from Washington. Welcome to In Business. You say over $1 trillion in illicit outflows from developing countries each year. Where does Libya rank?
Libya is almost unidentifiable because it does not file the necessary information with the International Monetary Fund to be analyzed. We don't know what the outflows are from Libya because their own data is not available.
Well, what we do know, from Swiss authorities at least, is that they are going to freeze assets in Switzerland. Does that mean that they've actually found Qaddafi's assets in Switzerland?
No, whenever Switzerland announces that it's freezing assets, what it's saying is that it is freezing any assets that it might have. It's sending out a notice to its banking institutions that if you have such assets, they are to be frozen. Same thing is true in the United States, UK, and elsewhere.
Well, why is Switzerland doing it before the United States, before the UK? I mean, it's really the only country that's come forward and said that they are looking not only at Libya, but they've frozen the assets of Egypt's Mubarak and Ben Ali of Tunisia.
Switzerland is trying to cultivate the image of greater cooperation in these kinds of issues. They were embarrassed by the UBS affair, where they were found to have criminally facilitated the evasion of U.S. taxes. Credit Suisse is now under investigation. Switzerland has been very cooperative in the business of going after terrorist financing. They're trying to cultivate the image of working with the international community to curtail illicit financial flows.
Is it then somewhat of an open secret as to the financial institutions that might be harboring some of these funds or might have accepted them?
Not an open secret, I wouldn't call it, but certainly Switzerland over the years, most of its banking, I won't say most, many of its banking institutions have been found to have been harboring such assets. The same is true in the UK, some U.S. financial institutions. The fact is, we have created the safe deposit boxes where this kind of money can bleed out of developing countries and into our own Western coffers.
Well, I mean, ostensibly, these countries and these companies are supposed to figure out ahead of time if the money that they're accepting is illegally obtained or through illegal activity. Swiss money laundering office did report that they had at least $76 million from financial institutions who flagged deposits from Tunisia's Ben Ali or associates. What happens to the money after they flag it, after they freeze it?
Well, after they freeze it, it is then subject to processes to recover it back to the country of origin. Switzerland has become a little more cooperative in that vein also. Switzerland used to require a conviction in the country of origin before it would send the money back. Switzerland has loosened that provision and is now willing to consider the return of money with somewhat less burdensome steps necessary to get the money back.
You know, when I was in Egypt, there was a lot of buzz about some of the huge numbers that had been rumored to be associated with Hosni Mubarak's bank accounts. People were almost tongue-in-cheek saying, let's create a sovereign wealth fund for the country once we recover that money. But to what degree is there a witch hunt of sorts? I mean, are we at this dangerous point, particularly in Egypt, where the asset freezes have now stretched fairly widely through former ministers and former heads of business? Or is this appropriate as someone who looks at financial integrity?
I certainly think it is appropriate steps to take. I'm less optimistic that it will be particularly successful. Successor regimes normally don't particularly like to come down too hard on predecessor regimes. because at some point in time they will be the regime that is succeeded by another. In Egypt, the military is heavily involved in business activities. The route to wealth for a former general is to become head of one of the dozens of military corporations that are established in the country. And so I would not expect, quite frankly, this interim government to go too hard after Mubarak's assets. To some extent, yes, but a wholesale onslaught on all the assets of the Mubarak family, I would be very surprised if that took place.
Yeah, well, it's interesting. I'm going to definitely want to follow your progress in trying to track down these assets, because until the financial institutions come forward, we're all looking at WikiLeaks documents for the figures. Thank you very much.